Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. I am excited. We got Seb joining us. We got Tyler here for the first time, and we got Shaun as always. Now, while I am excited, y'all should be too. Make sure you're doing all the things. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays for The Gold Mine and Fridays for The Collective. We're going to be talking about some really cool topics about stepping out of the status quo. But before we get there, let's hit some intros. Seb, you know the drill. 10 to 15 seconds. What do you got?
Yeah, Seb Lavoie, a friend of the collective, back for episode number, what is this? 80, 86, 87?
89, 88, somewhere in there.
All right. Glad to be here, guys.
Yeah, he's been around. Tell you. Tyler, how about yourself? 10, 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
10, 15 seconds. Thank you so much, gents. I am coming from city of Red Deer, Alberta, beautiful Alberta. Seb, I heard you moved to Alberta, so welcome here. Perfect. I come from an industry of first response, so a firefighter paramedic for about 30 years. I'm currently a deputy chief. I drive a desk right now. I'm also a member of one of 6 national disaster response teams across Canada called Canada Task Force. And so I'm a member of Canada Task Force 2. Had the opportunity to help communities across Alberta and Canada and some of the largest natural disasters over the last 10 years. Personally, I've got I've had some, just like we've all had in our lives, I've had some resilience and adversity challenges, I guess, if you will. And so come from a background of violent crime and lost a friend and had some bad things happen once in life and have grown from there. And in my 40s, I'm starting on a journey of joining the military and reserves. So along the lines of that, and that was how Shaun and I connected. So I've been married 25 years this year. Like long walks and cold plunges. So that's
There
me.
you go. Long walks on the beach and good conversation, and I love it. Love it. Now, Shaun, how's life in the mountains?
Things are good. I just want to give everyone the heads up that one of the reasons that Tyler is on the show this morning is because he followed me recently, and I thought, who's this guy? And as I often do, someone follows me, I'll immediately check out their backstory. And I read Tyler's backstory, and I thought, wow, that is pretty heavy, man. And so if anyone hasn't seen Tyler's backstory, it's worth eyeballing what Tyler came through in order to get to the position that he is in now. And it's a really inspiring story in respect to rebuilding yourself up after some adversity. And as a follow-on, Tyler bumped into me through Building the Elite podcast, episode 1 and episode 2 that I was on. And he just started tracking me. And so I guess what I'm going to say is we're talking about the status quo today, and the status quo as it is now is me following cool people and cool people following me, I guess. And that's how we all know each other, because I followed cool people. And so maybe that's part of the status quo that we'll talk about today as well.
Absolutely. The first thing I wanted to actually get into is when you think of the status quo, when you heard the topic, what was your first thoughts? Like, what was the thing that you were like, you know what, this will be really interesting, ... Seb, I'm gonna start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is comfort. You know, when you talk about status quo, is comfort. Are we at a point now where we've embraced a certain amount of discomfort to the point where it's now comfortable and we remain in that? We don't question whether or not we need to be challenging ourselves any further, or we stay away from the challenging endeavors as anybody else does. And it's interesting because you can take somebody that has a propensity and the ability to challenge themselves regularly, and eventually by complacency alone and without too much fanfares, you start getting comfortable and you realize that you have stopped challenging your own status quo. And this is the first thing that comes to mind. And I've got a ton of examples because I've been through it, as everybody else here on the panel.
100%. I love that. Tyler, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were that the three gents I was going to be chatting with are anything but the status quo. So I thought it was a pretty poignant conversation. I think Seb hit the nail on the head for me. Just to keep pushing ourselves and doing hard things. In the status quo, we're only given today. And so, what does that mean? What does that look like? Don't get me wrong, I definitely enjoy sitting on the deck and enjoying a coffee and seeing a nice sunset. But there's definitely something about pushing yourself every day, and that status quo is status quo is a dangerous thing, I think, at times. That's just my own initial thoughts.
Yeah, I like it. Shaun, what was your first thoughts?
Got some notes.
Oh,
It's
4
turning
days
into my status
in a
quo.
row.
Four
Geez.
podcasts, 4 notes in a row. So this is a very short one. What I did do was the etymology of status quo, or where the origination came from, just to give some sense of what it all means, I guess. And so I'll read it very quickly. Status quo comes from the Latin term in statu quo ante bellum, which translates to in the, now this is super important, in the state in which things were before the war. In the state in which things were before the war. Now, over time, that has come to mean the existing state of affairs, maintaining existing conditions, especially in political, social, and organizational contexts, which has got nothing to do with the origination of the word. What we now use status quo for is same old, keep it the same. Don't go a-changing, don't rock the boat. Whereas what it used to mean, which was a way more powerful Latin phrase, is, I'll read it again, before the war. The things before the war. And so what I took it for is this. Same old is just status quo nowadays. But the moment something significant happens, that's when things are supposed to change. But I think there's so many significant things happening nowadays out there in the world that is now the status quo. And we just kind of shrug our shoulders and say, whatever, man. And so that's my first thoughts.
Ooh, this is gonna go deep. I'm loving this already. Now, I have some videos here that I want to get into, and it touches on where we're going with this. Initially, it's about kind of the first thing that happens when you start to push the status quo, which is going to be tough conversations. So here we go.
Better at having hard conversations.
Any part of life is shaped by the ability to have hard conversations, whether it's friendships, romantic love, familial relationships. If we can't have challenging conversations with each other, the relationship cannot improve. Like, they are forged by difficult conversations. And so many of us are so deeply afraid of confrontation, the rejection or the abandonment that might ensue after a confrontation, or just saying it wrong, that nothing ever gets better. So the starting point of any hard conversation is knowing that everything gets better when you can have them. Even if you have them badly right now, having them badly is better than not having them at all. The target is not the person. We're trying to improve the relationship. And this is getting in the way of our relationship right now, or this is making it difficult. When you're the one willing to point that out, you give the thing a chance to become what it's truly capable of becoming.
Or you give it a chance to bounce off and realize that it's not.
And the trap is that you think by not having the hard conversation, by not challenging a dynamic, that it's somehow safer.
Bam. So let's get some thoughts on that. Tyler, what do you think?
Wow, this is going to be a deep conversation for sure. I couldn't agree more with the notion of conflict is a thing. Like, we're going to have conflict. We're going to be in conflict, whether you're in a team or your marriage or friends, family. And I don't disagree that I think we seem to shy away from, don't move, don't get hurt, whether that's in your personal relationships. I say we, sorry, I'm not suggesting that the four of us are like that. Of course, we're not like that. But yeah, I think it can be easy for us as humans to take the easy road, unfortunately, at times. And I love what he says. I love what he says. My wife will tell you I'm probably we married the opposites. She's quiet and introverted, and I'm the opposite. And I like to go hard at a problem, and the emotional intelligence piece doesn't always kick in for me. So yeah, I think it's awesome. Love it. Love the conversation so far.
I'm in the same boat. I make a lot of stupid statements. There's conflict. My wife will tell you that for sure. Seb, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm a big Matt Hussey fan. I think he's got lots of good insight when it comes to relationship. So for me, it comes down to this. We're prioritizing protecting feelings over having the conversations that are required to make things better. It's no different than refusing to introspect or refusing to look inwards on account of the way it's going to make us feel and prevent us from growth, from engaging in growth. And a relationship is no different. Now, with that, there are different styles of communication, and that's a piece that's important to understand about our partners, and we can optimize how we convey a certain message in the context of a relationship. And I use relationship just because the video was relationship centric, but I do believe that the problem often when it comes to relationship isn't that we don't have the conversation, is we have the conversation the wrong way, or we have the conversation with perhaps resentment or in an angry state, and we don't have necessarily the conversation preemptively before something happens that challenges the relationship, now where the emotions are heightened, and now we try to engage at something that's supposed to be repairing whatever it is that's going on. So all of this needs to be, those conversations, and the difficult conversations, do not need to occur when conflict occur. Quite to the opposite, they should occur prior to conflict arising. So that prevents, the trap of trying to have a fixer-upper conversation in the middle of chaos, which we know where that's going to lead.
I'm digging this, Shaun. What do you got?
So there's lots of stuff to chew on there from the fellas and from the video. Unfortunately, I've got to throw out my first thought, which was occurring about 10 seconds into the video, and it's this. Irrespective of what a person thinks about conflict or friction or bumping up against the edges and being uncomfortable in a conversation, whatever, man, that's how the human population evolved. That's how we got to be where we're at right now. I mean, if you really just zoom out from the day-to-day minutia, get the satellite view of our entire human history, it's kind of required that we had friction, we had tension, we had adaptation through evolution. The being upset with someone is evolution. Being uncomfortable with someone is evolution. Unless you stick your head in the sand and pretend that it's not happening. And so I'll like to say this, that irrespective of anyone on this panel right now, whatever we think we're doing in the moment to create evolution or adaptation for that person and for ourselves as the two-way highway, it's only occurring if the other person is in the game with you. And so they can dig their heels in, they can put up all the roadblocks, they can build a freaking brick wall 10 feet tall and not be involved in the conversation. Well, that's on them. But then it's also on us to help them break down that wall so that they can have these further conversations with others. So for me, I think, as he said, even if the conversation is done completely wrong, it's better to have a wrong conversation than a non-conversation.
Let's go around again. Tyler, thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I feel a little bit like, I couldn't agree more. That's the best way to put it, from what Shaun just said, and even what Seb talked a little bit about, just even separating that and having the conversation prior to. I know for me, I have a couple of good friends that doesn't matter what we're going to talk about, we could separate that issue. And I've never heard it put in that context, just about the evolution and the bumping into the edges of, but it's that evolution of relationship. It's that evolution of accountability to each other, accountability for whatever we're dealing with. I'm learning so much, and glad to be a part of the conversation so far. It's amazing.
Awesome. Seb, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as unsettling as a conversation can be in the context of a romantic relationship, for example, we know that that's probably the toughest scenarios that will be involved in when it comes to having these conversations. Generally speaking, if you're with like-minded individual, that generally will push each other and elevate each other, and those are a lot in my experience. They've been a lot less sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot less resistance there, simply because there's mechanics that are not engaged in a romantic relationship, and so your friends are there for a reason. They're there because they want that. You want the other thing. Sometimes there's underlying reasons why somebody is in a romantic relationship, and those reasons are necessarily not elevation, and so I think that developing the strategic abilities to have the conversation based upon who we have in front of us without changing the core of who we are is a critical piece in navigating this, and having the skills to recognize that when you need to change and evolve your communication style, and perhaps flank, so metaphorically flanking a person rather than going head to head with everybody, as we discussed a million times over, really can help facilitate the betterment of the person that's trying to communicate, and have the ability to communicate with different styles and different, emotional investment and different things. So having the ability to read in context and apply strategic communication to these pieces allow you to have the conversation that are critically necessary for growth without necessarily, starting World War III every time.
Yeah. I think this is also, I was just thinking about the fact that in any sort of relationship, if you're going to just the engagement, I like the way Shaun put this earlier when he said with the etymology of before the war, is that's the, getting to know somebody. That's the understanding who we are as either a couple or as a friendship or as a partnership, whatever it is. It allows us to then, I guess, once you reach a certain point, then you can then have to push the status quo again, and then you reach a certain point and then have to push it again, and so on and so on and so forth. So there's never a point where you can just sit back and say, yeah, we're all good now. So that's awesome. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Well, I've got a reputation, and maybe it's not a great reputation, but it's a reputation to cause trouble, stir the pot, create friction, create tension.
I was gonna say, where's your spoon?
One of the largest spoons in the world. It's like a big ladle. And so it's my way. It's my way that I do things. It's the way that I do things with myself. It's the way that I do things with everyone around me. And it's not like a responsibility, or it's not like, it's a hat that I've always got to wear, or it's not what defines me in my own head, but it's what defines me for other people to some degree. And so for all of my shortcomings, and creating tension is a shortcoming, except when it's not. And so it's really dependent on who's in front of you and what the moment is all about. And I think to step back from that, irrespective of tension or not, why you're there. Are you wasting your time, or are you investing your time? And so if I've got someone in front of me, or I'm in a group, or I'm on a panel like this, today or years from now, I'm always thinking about, why am I here? What's going on right now? The last 60 seconds that I just invested in this conversation, was it a good investment? And so for me, I've observed this with myself, that Shaun needs to know that his time is going to make a change. And to create change requires tension or friction, requires bumping up against the hard edges, requires exploring the full left and right of arc of the battle space that's directly in front of me. If I'm just shooting a straight laser beam down the center line, nothing's happening, because everyone's done that years and years and years past. So I'm looking to explore the fullness, or, a word that is now in my head for the last year, and it's because of Seb, uses totality of the experience. If you're not considering that every moment that you're in the game with someone, then you don't know your why of the moment. You don't know the how of the moment. You might as well just turn on your heel and walk out of there if you're not there with purpose. But your purpose doesn't mean that it's going to be easy peasy lemon squeezy. It just means that you got to know why you're there. You got to figure out your how, and then you've got to like stick with it. You can't be 40% into a conversation with someone who you're really trying to help, or someone who is really important, or the needle that really has to be moved. You can't be 40% in and think, this is getting a bit difficult. I'm bouncing. No, I've got my teeth sunk into it, and I'm going to see it right through to the finish line. And so I know I've said a few things there, but I do believe that friction is necessary, and it's for us in the moment, the present moment, to understand why we're in the present moment.
I love that you bring things back to the why. It's such an important aspect of all of this and everything that we do. And there are many people out there that if you ask them why they did something, they'd be like, I don't know. And I'm not going to get into that. It's a whole nother conversation. Any other thought? I got another couple videos here. So any other thoughts on that before we jump into the next one? Tyler,
I think the only thing I was going to say, thanks, my friend, is it just resonated me with both of what Seb was saying and Shaun. It's that piece of, I think we feel like trust is going to be broken. We feel like we can't go forward from there, and that which we fear at times is exactly where we need to go, and we fear the relationship not continuing on if we're talking about that, or we fear what's going to happen at the other end of conflict. And I just really love how you've all eloquently said it needs to push through that to be able to evolve to it. And if we think about the why are we here every day? There is a purpose. We're here for things bigger than ourselves. We're here to make a difference on this earth, to help others around us. And you only can do that through experiencing all of those emotions, including dealing with conflict and being, concerned about the impacts. Because I think, to Seb's point, if we recognize that there's going to be an impact, and we need to know the situation we're going into, like Shaun talked about, we're going to be mindful of that, and being mindful and being present is huge, especially when we talk about our why and we think about what the purpose of the conflict is we're in, or what that looks like. So in challenging status quo, I think that this has all been just amazing so far.
Love it. The each one of these videos that I got is going to be successively. There we go. It follows the same kind of path. So this is exactly where we're going to go next. Is that at first, we've had hard conversations, but now we actually have to change our actions. We got to do different things. We physically need to change. So let's get into it.
Everyone with you. And that is a part of the transitional pain of anyone who's deciding to move out of the status quo. Because every single time I decided to elevate, I lost friends. And it was always my fault.
Always going to be your fault. Yeah. You left them.
No,
you've changed.
That's right. And
that's right.
You know why they say that?
Because you did.
That's right.
You absolutely changed.
So you can't go, no, I didn't.
No, you did. Because you had to.
Yeah.
It was out of necessity.
But you know what we don't say back because we don't have the courage?
Yeah.
But you didn't.
Bam. Let's take a look. Seb, what are your first thoughts on this?
Yeah, that was an interesting reaction with the mic push. I love that. But as tough as it is to acknowledge that we are seeking growth and that we are going to take some actions in order to reach that growth or to change in a way, I think having the conversation about you're staying in the same spot is something that's on a completely different level, and that takes the right relationship to be able to do that, and it takes the right sort of strategic communication skills and the right delivery, and this can be said in many other ways. It doesn't need to be necessarily, again, to reiterate this, it doesn't necessarily need to be a frontal assault. So if you have somebody in your life that's worth the investment, having the conversation about growth and status quo is something that's very, very feasible and very beneficial to grow the relationship. Some person that's in your circle might or might not be aware of the status quo that they're engaged in, and sometimes it doesn't even need to be a specific conversation with respect to, okay, I'm going to target them specifically. How about I talk about myself and I bring them to realize certain things about themselves without me telling them that I've observed a status quo, for example. So all that I think about when I hear those things is I have to assume that if somebody's in your life, if that person is worth the investment, how am I going to push through this together, and how can I strategically address these things without causing a massive shockwave, and have the ability to influence somebody's actions that will inherently benefit them, but the conversation might not, And then at the end of the day, there's also the piece about if you have somebody in your circle that just perhaps shouldn't have been in your circle, or should no longer be in your circle on account of some of the decision and the actions they're taking, well, we're going to find out when you realize that you need to be pushing through some plateaus, right? So lots of good sort of conversation point, lots of good sort of self-awareness and self-regulation point with respect to delivery of the message, with respect to engaging in those conversations, and do so in a manner that's conducive to continuing the relationship, if that relationship is worth investing in, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, 100%. Tyler, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have a few, and I love what Seb was saying. Just my initial thought when I saw the video was just a little bit of a different flavor, in the sense that when we think about elevating ourselves and growth and status quo, we've talked about it already, but staying the same just isn't an option. And the interesting thing about changing yourself or redefining yourself, and we've probably all done this. We have the people in this room have all done this at one time or another, or continue to push themselves unbelievably. But people won't recognize you, and kind of what Seb was getting at. Hey, maybe those people in that circle that have been there maybe are either maybe shouldn't have been there, or maybe you're outgrowing them. They're not going to recognize you, and it's going to make them uncomfortable. Fascinating little story. I lost 65 pounds over the last year or so. I just started walking one day. I started walking the dog. I think I walk about 10 to 15K a day. And the fascinating part, because it's a physical change, so people can see it, right? It's a physical change. People can be like, "Are you okay?" I mean, and great. They're starting from a place of, "Hey, is everything okay?" Especially folks, I love the saying where all these reels and memes where they say, "Hey, take a month, take 90 days, take 6 months, and go and just work on yourself, and then people won't recognize you and see where you're at, and invest in yourself." And holy cow, put that to the test, especially from a physical perspective. But people don't recognize you, right? Who are you? Is there something wrong? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? But when it's in your heart for yourself, and that you need to grow and you need to push yourself. So whether that's even a relationship, we bring it back to the conversations we've been having about relationships. Just like we evolve, those relationships evolve, and maybe a relationship gets to a place, whether it's out of those burnt edges, whether it's out of rubbing, maybe one of the partners or one of the people in the relationships is growing in a different way. Just such an amazing conversation so far, but I can completely identify with the idea behind growth, and that people won't recognize you. You're going to make people around you uncomfortable, and that's okay. Because you don't need to be understood, to be perfectly honest, if it's right for you, and you're going to start to then connect with a new circle, and those 5 people you spend time with or follow or observe are going to make you who you need to be and push you to that next level. Again, we're not given tomorrow, so if you knew today was your last day, or you start at a place of death, as Marcus Aurelius talks about, and then go from there, then what? Right? Then everything is a bonus, and life is just beautiful, whether it's a mess or not. So I'll leave it there. There's probably lots of rabbit holes we can go down. So
there's so many rabbit holes. We were joking around when we first got the show started that we were going to call it the tangent show, because we always had the different rabbit holes we could just go down. Shaun, any thoughts on this?
I do. And so I don't know if I'll just give you my opinion on the video. It might be a little bit different from everyone else's, and it might be too harsh. It might be too judgy. But when I was finished watching and listening to the video, here's what I thought. Those 2 guys have got the wrong attitude. They're really proud of the fact that they ditched people. I leveled up, screw the rest of you. That's kind of what I took away from it. Now, maybe that's not what they were saying, but it's my feeling. I watched the video. I had a sense of it, a feeling within me. I understand the verbiage. I understand the message, but it was the underlining feeling that I got from the video. And it was like, screw them. They're behind me. I'm moving forward. I'm winning. You're losing. Whatever, man. Cut the strings. And I think that's pretty uncool. I thought the video was kind of uncool. I thought their attitudes were kind of uncool. Now, they might be cool guys. It just didn't come across to me in that moment. And so I'd like to say this, that I relentlessly pursue excellence. It was what it was drilled into me. And so I've never stopped. But that doesn't mean that every day I'm pointing my finger at someone that I just left behind yesterday, mocking and teasing them. I mean, what was with the mic drop moment that come on. It was contrived. It's performative, in my opinion. And so I think it's cool that someone pursues aggressively to become a better person, but you can't keep looking over your shoulder and it's not the right message. It's not the right standard. It's not the right example of why someone should actually pursue. Because if the idea out there is that the moment that you get up another level, you're flipping the bird to everyone behind you, I'm not into it. As Seb said, I'm into leveling up and dragging everyone with me, willingly or not. And so if as I drag and they're unwillingly coming with me, if after a while I can't drag anymore or they don't want to be dragged anymore, okay, now we have clarity. But it just can't be a and punch forward into the future.
This gave me an interesting thought, I guess, question on it then is that, do you think that if for somebody like that, for somebody that is still very attached to the past or their previous lives or their previous friend group or whatever it is, that previous relationship, or do you think that that feeling comes from a continual attachment to that look in the rearview mirror? Like every time you're looking over your shoulder going, ha, you think that's just due to the fact that you can't let go of what is behind you? What do you think? Tyler, I'm going to come to you.
That's a good question. Even Shaun's perspective was great. Amazing perspective on the video. Yeah, I don't know. I really like what Shaun had to say just about the notion of bringing everybody with you, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. The example around us, those inspire us. So, yeah, I don't know. Great question. Is it you looking at yourself back that way, or is it them looking at you? And yeah, I don't know. I got to think through that one for a little bit more.
Raj, I'll come back to you. Seb,
yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah, can you reframe the question a bit? I'm a bit confused by it.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that if you're holding on to any sort of lingering feelings of I'm better, or you're looking back behind you and saying and laughing at those that aren't as moved up as you are, do you think that you're holding on to an attachment of either yourself in the past, or you're still holding on to them that and you're just not letting go of it? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that will be on an individual basis, and we won't know until we speak to the individual himself. But I would say what it comes across to me as, though, is feeding your ego. And we live in a time now. We live in a time where elevation is of the occasion. Doing hard things is on every T-shirt, on every influencer's thing. Everybody speaks about this now. Everybody lives it. But what people do is they get a dopamine hit in engaging in the verbiage around certain behaviors without necessarily engaging fully in those behaviors. And we all know that authenticity has a smell. It has a smell. If you are somebody that truly, genuinely care for your relationships, but also care for the pursuit of excellence, of elevating yourself as a human being, automatically there should be a selfless piece of that comes with elevating others around you. If this is about you separating yourself from the pack, it's now feeding your ego. You're doing it for the wrong reason. And I'm going to argue that you're probably not doing it correctly, because you care more about how it makes you feel than what the end result of the outcome is going to be. And so I felt a little bit the same way as Shaun did. I didn't articulate it or verbalize it, but that's the reason why I embarked on the conversation right after that explained that I would be attempting to bring the relationship that matters, in the next cycle of this evolution or this adaptation, wherever you are. But we have to be very, very careful. Am I doing this because it makes me feel good, or am I doing this correctly so that I may achieve a desired outcome?
I'm loving where this is going. Shaun, thoughts?
I do. And so something that is of interest to me, and this will make my point very clearly. A couple of weeks ago, a couple of guys came through my region, and I went out to join them for coffee, and we sat down for a couple of hours. These two guys I haven't seen for nearly 30 years. I used to be in Tier 1 with them. Good guys. And within 10 or 15 minutes of our conversation, they were nodding their heads and smiling, and they said, "You know what? You haven't changed a bit." Now, let that sink in. That's 30 years later, and I'm still who I was then. You haven't changed a bit. And it was I guess it was a pat on the back for me that I've stayed true to who I am. Now, I'm older. I'm not as tough as I used to be. And I've got a few more scars, I suppose. But I still am who I am. How I think, how I act, how I portray myself, I've stayed pretty true to that. And so if you can ask around, get someone to look at you from the last 10, 20, 30 years, and if they can say your central theme, your pillars of who you are, what you believe deeply inside of you hasn't changed in decades, then you're doing something right, as long as those are positive things. On the flip side of the coin, if they would have said, "You know what? You haven't changed at all since I last saw you. You're still a goof." That's telling. That's something that you should let sink in. Because if you haven't changed in decades as a goof, you're a bigger goof now, and someone is relaying that to you, which again is part of this conversation, the status quo. What do you do in that moment? Do you look at the person in the eye and say, "Cool story, man. Anyway, listen, I got to go. Let's get together in another 40 years." If your status quo is you don't want to face yourself in that moment through the friction of the conversation when someone says, "Dude, you're still a goof." Well, where's the evolution? Where's the adaptation? There is none. And 40 years later, the conversation will still be, "Dude, you're still a goof. Why did you waste all that time?" And so look around at your friend group. If you've got some old friends who know you from back in the day, ask them what they think about what you're doing now. Are you cooler, or are you goofier?
I guess it also goes into the fact of, do you still have friends from back in the day? Or do have you separated from them already? Have you let them go? Have they let you go? Those things, that's a whole other side of the conversation. Tyler, you got some thoughts?
I think, it's a whole other side of the conversation. I can think back in my mind. There's a couple folks that I could sit and have coffee with that were from 30 years ago, and that authenticity and that connectedness that we'd be able to speak into each other's lives exactly like that. But just that maturity that it takes to, to think about where your areas of weakness are, what your vulnerabilities are, and where you need to change, and what that looks like. I think that's pretty powerful stuff that Shaun had to say. And love Seb's comments on it too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Shaun used to actually toss his mic away every once in a while, and and it wasn't as performative as the video was, but he did do it at times, and I still miss it every once in a while because he used to drop mics, and then he would like kind of toss his mic off and leave us all hanging. It was awesome.
Nice.
Any other thoughts on any of this? I got another video here I want to throw up, but if you guys are good to go to move on, all right, here we go.
Matter what challenges it is that you are facing there. It is the fundamental principle behind it that you do not run away. That you are open for everything that is being thrown at you. It is this type of mindset to also understand, I didn't ask for an easy life. I take what comes. If it leaves, I let it pass.
Bam. I just absolutely love the line. I didn't ask for an easy life. I love it. What are you guys' thoughts? Let's go with Shaun first this time. What do you think?
I like that guy. He's got a cool demeanor, and I've watched quite a few of his clips. He's got that Zenerific mentality, so I dig it. None of us should ask for an easy life, but a lot of people try to create an easy life. And so, that's an entirely different conversation. I think something that struck me when he was talking is how through his calmness, his carefully considered delivery of each word, it's hard for everyone to resonate with what he's saying because their mind is in such turmoil that they don't understand the vibe. They don't have the synchronicity to pick up what he's putting down. And so he's the status quo for some people, but not for everyone. And so there's a number of status quos that need to exist out there. I'm not him, he's not me. And the people that he can't communicate to, then maybe I can communicate to them, or Seb can communicate, or Tyler, or Chance. We all have our part to play. We are the status quo for someone out there. And so within that status quo for someone out there, that might mean that I have a fiery move the needle pace, whereas the video speaker isn't quite as fiery, isn't quite as move the needle for some people. And so we all have our role to play. And my status quo is not his status quo, but there's a status quo out there for everyone.
Absolutely. Seb, what do you got?
And you're whipping out all the big dogs today, eh? Hang Yi, just an incredible speaker and just philosopher and all of those things. And I just like Shaun, I echo what Shaun said. Just absolutely respect the stuff that comes out of that guy's mouth. Very, very insightful. This one was a little bit interesting to me in that there's a lot of talk, and in the context of this conversation, there's a lot of talk and talking about status quo and having conversation related to status quo, and perhaps challenging the status quo either internally or externally by having conversations about what we ought to be doing. I think that what's really important and not to be negated is to engage in that, to engage in the changes that are required. And sometimes what you do teaches a lot more than what you say. And I would say most of the time it's the case. And so for me, when I decide to do something that I know is beneficial for myself, that it's going to elevate me. And when I say elevate me, I don't mean elevate above others. I mean elevate myself in relation to who I was an hour ago. I often think of the underlying and sort of by proxy results that is likely to occur, which is somebody that's paying attention, that's around you in your circle, is going to notice and start actioning things so that they may step it up a bit. And I can take an example of this, and I know I'm pretty certain I speak on behalf of Shaun when I say this, but every time Shaun is on a podcast, I listen to it. I listen to it for two reasons. One, because he's my friend and I love to hear what he has to say, and B, because how good is this guy now? What do I have to, where do I have to push to? And for the last, 2 to 3 years, it's been a back and forth, and you're elevating along with the people that are in your life, that are in your circle. And it's a non-threatening elevation. It's a very organic elevation, and it reinforces the friendship instead of interfering with it, because there's no fear, there's no self-doubt, there's no questioning self-worth, because we've put in enough action to not have to worry about what we are portraying and just sort of be ourselves. And so, I just want to clarify that you don't necessarily have to have the elevation conversation with everybody at all times when you're engaging in things. Like, you can just engage in things, and you oftentimes it will inherently spark some sort of elevation in the people around in your circle. You may not even have to have certain conversations, and it will still have the sort of the impact that you would hope to have if you're having a direct conversation in an attempt to sort of trigger growth. Now, I want to use a practical example just to go back to something very simple for me, because I recently had an example that I think brings some value. And I think that the dangerous part of status quoing is that you are going to somehow justify what you are doing. And now it no longer becomes the status quo, because you are firmly believing that what you are doing is correct on account of the justification that your brain will push out on you. And I had that happen, and I had to recognize this, and I almost didn't. And so, as aware as I am, I almost didn't recognize it. So I can tell you that for somebody that's a lot less self-aware, these things are gonna grow legs and really run your life, and you're simply not going to engage in these things because you'll constantly have a reason why not to. So I'll give you an example of this. I've been, for the last 2 to 3 years, involved in freaking thousands of podcasts, get involved in a lot of speaking engagement, do all of this stuff. And now, recently, I was approached by a movie director, and they said, "Hey, we have this role that we would like to engage you in. It's a short film, but it is something that's sort of very close to your own persona, and we think that you do well at this." So they said, "We'd like to see a self-tape from you. An audition tape for acting." I'm not an actor, so I have no idea what a self-tape was. So, I had to give them an answer by the end of the day, so to speak. So I started researching, doing all of this stuff to try to see if I could make this happen. And the more I looked into it, the less I was confident that I could make this happen. And I started realizing that I was disabling because it was so incredibly uncomfortable for me to engage in that pursuit that I wanted nothing to do with it. So I found every single little reason, and cognitive bias kicked in full force. And I was like gathering all this information and reinforcing my position. And as soon as this started to happen, and I started realizing I was fortifying around myself, I called myself out immediately on the spot. I'm like, and that's exactly why you need to do it. I don't care what happens. And I called myself out, and I said, "Yep, I'm in." I didn't know what that was going to look like. I didn't know if I could bring value. I hoped I would, and I knew I was going to put the work in to try to do as much as I could before filming started. And so it became less about a desired outcome and more about the individual steps and the steps that I would take to optimize my performance, to optimize the value that I brought to the operation. So just like you would when you get on a firing line and it's a qualification and you're going to shoot, if you start thinking about how you're going to pass or fail and what the consequences of that are, you're going to create a whole bunch of stress that is completely irrelevant, and it will impact your performance. But if you think about, I'm at 7 meters now, what are some of the shooting mechanics I need to employ in order to make this stage happen every single round at a time, one round at a time, and do so through 5 different stages, and have the adaptability to realize where I'm at now and what are the actions that I need to be taken so that I can be successful in the end as a byproduct of doing the right things in the moment. That is precisely what needed to happen with me. And so I put all of the work in to try to optimize what a non-actor would be, by taking essentially acting classes on YouTube and doing, rehearsals in the mirror and having somebody look at me. And I found all of the strategies that I could possibly implement in a very short period of time to try to optimize my performance. Now, I'm not suggesting I had a great performance, but I will say this, they were very surprised that I was a non-actor. And also I brought a ton of value in other ways because their script, was certainly lacking in the reality or the realistic feel that they were after for the military context. And I was there with my experience to help them clean it up. And so I found alternative ways to bring value. So it was not everything was hinging on me and my performance. And so I use this as a metaphor for absolutely everything you can engage in. But I caution you on letting your brain justify to you why you're not doing certain things, because your brain will make you think that you need an orange when you're craving sugar, and you will be like, well, it's a fruit, it's good to go, right? And again, another metaphor, but the brain has the propensity to trick us. There's treachery involved in this. And then there's, that's going to lead you to not take the steps that you need to be taken, and you need to have the self-awareness to recognize when you are disabling.
I love this. I actually was just on the mat this morning. I was talking with the guy I was working with, and we were talking about pressure and how, when you're really under pressure physically, like when someone's sitting on your chest, you can very easily panic. You can very easily, why am I even here? What am I doing? What is this? And it's such a great allegory for life, in the fact that a lot of times the pressures that we feel are made up, and they're not really pressure. They're just, it's very different when you have a 250-pound dude sitting on your chest to when, your boss needs something done. Those are different types of pressure, but one's very physical. Tyler, you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, again, just some amazing folks you have inspiring the conversations, the hang it just inspires me to keep exploring, building off what Seb is saying. All those moments in life, good, bad, ugly, the idea behind being self-aware enough, being mindful enough to connect with what we're feeling, what's going on around us. I love your analogy, Seb. In my career, I was a firefighter paramedic, so I chose a pillow. I didn't choose the gun, so I can't relate to the exact to that per se, I guess, if you will. But as you very beautifully put, and as Chance is talking about, a lot of the stressors that we create are our own internal stressors. I love the idea behind the bias that you're speaking of, and how we literally will talk ourselves out of things because we don't know how to do it. I love Richard Branson, I think, said it at one point. Somebody asks you to do something, you don't know how to do it, you say yes, and you figure out how to do it along the way. Totally, right? And so, the things that ring true for me, and I try to keep things as simple as I can. Again, I think we are the only ones in our life who know what work we need to put in to make ourselves better. And how many people wish and hope and desire and, wish on a star and a 4-leaf clover that they're going to be, their life could be different. They could do different things. They could be in a different place. They could, how many people do we hear complain about the jobs they have on any given day or the situation they're in? And if they really looked internally and spent some time internally, learned how to be mindful, learned how to really be introspective, and be thankful, not thankful for all things, but thankful in all things, and recognize that life is happening for us and not to us, and that we can make change. We can make changes in our lives. We can apply things. We can do the hard things, but only us knows what those things are, right? We only know the dark areas we need to improve. I love the idea of how you just that example, Seb, where you just said, yeah, I'm at the end of the day, you called yourself out and said, I'm going to try it. And then recognized how that value came in other places, right? How many people could be doing so many amazing things in life if they just got out of their own way and see what they bring to the table, because we all bring things to the table. We all have a purpose in this life bigger than us. So yeah, it's such an inspiring conversation thus far. I think I'll just use a personal analogy too, in building on the idea that, when we go and do other things, people see that we do other things. And so leave the words out of it. let our deeds say what we're going to do and inspire others. In my personal story of forgiveness, my mom was the one who inspired me to go see the guy who tried to kill me in prison. And it was my mom who went and did it first, right? My mom took had the guts to go. And at the time, it's like, when you talk forgiveness, that's a whole other conversation we could have. But such a huge growth and such a huge thing in our lives when you think about the ability to see life for what it is, the beauty and the ashes and the good, the bad and the ugly. The people around us inspire us. The three people on the call that we're with today, much like Shaun was talking about, he's connecting with cool people, and those people are inspiring us every day to be better versions of ourselves, and then to continue to make other people better versions of themselves and help each other. So yeah, I think for me, it was a great video, and even what Seb was talking about just continues to inspire those around, and get out of our own ways and pursue excellence and help all those around us, like we talked about before. So
love it. Getting out of our own way. This is something really important thing to do. Shaun, what do you got?
Just two really quick points. One is, Chance, you referenced someone sitting on a chest, 250 pounder on the BJJ mats. So in that moment, it's all about the why. Why are you there, dude? Why do you have a guy on your chest? Because if your why is, it seemed like a fun idea, but I'm out of here, and then they never go back to BJJ again. Or if their why is, I got to learn how to defend myself, well, maybe they'll stick around a little bit longer. Or if they tell themselves, man, I haven't faced adversity in a long time, I'm going to commit 10 years to this because that's what I deserve. That's what I need. That's what I am going to become. So your why is what defines you in the moment. Why? That's it. That's all. And if your why isn't strong enough, you'll bounce. Second thing, status quo. I'm looking at Seb right now, and I've been looking at Seb's setup from the get-go, right from the first second of the podcast. And this is telling. This is telling about what a person is about. So not too long ago, when Seb was out on the left coast, his lighting wasn't great. His setup wasn't great. Now he's got a freaking Hollywood set that he's on. The lighting is perfect. The sound is perfect. The backdrop is perfect. Everything has a reason. Everything has a purpose. Everything looks tight. This is what I thought the moment that I saw it. Oh, man. Seb freaking leveled up again. And you know what my next thought was? I got to level up as well. But I was cheering Seb when I saw that. In my mind, I was like, yes, leveled up. I wasn't like, oh, what a jerk. Now I've got to beat him. Well, I will beat him because that's my way. But it's like running alongside of him and smiling at him as I'm running alongside of him. And if I manage to pass him, I'm going to cheekily look over my shoulder and keep on smirking at him and say, pick up the pace. Because that's what we do. You've got to find the game within the game. And Seb has leveled up. And he's changed his status quo. And that takes thought. And then that takes action. You can have all the plans in your head. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Next year I will become. Well, Seb is living that. And so you can, again, thoughts to action is what is required to change the status quo.
That is a fantastic boy. You just brought up a thing in my head here of as Seb's been going on when he was talking about the film and doing things that he's never done before. I was like, yeah, but Seb's just gonna do his best, and like he's gonna do his best. He's not gonna try his best. Shaun and you and I were chatting about this the other day. Was the fact that it's not about trying your best is not doing it. Thinking about your best is not doing it. Talking about your best isn't doing it. Doing your best is doing your best. And that's what Seb brings to the table on a regular basis. And I just love that. Now, we are just about an hour. I got a couple little comments here I just want to hit on real quick. I have one from the Instagram, but I haven't been able to get it onto here. But it says, it's a great line. Can't lead from the front, flipping the bird to those behind. Such a great line from Unger 12530. And then we got these ones. John jumped in here early on. Morning Squad, sexy new backdrop 7-8er. Looking forward to being one of the first guests at the new retreat there. Dun, dun, dun. And he says, the producer must have seen your YouTube video, Poetic Savagery. What's the movie now? Yes, the Poetic Savagery series. Dude, those have been wicked. I've loved watching those. And then he hits in here, Big Bird has had the best set for the longest time. He'll just enter the set game. Come get me. So on that note, let's get some final thoughts on the status quo, on breaking out of the status quo, on anything we've talked about so far. Anything still rattling in the back of your heads? Tyler, anything at all? What do you got?
I will be leveling up my set for the next time we chat, not just my brand new office that we're sitting in. So I'll make sure that happens next time I get to chat with you, gents. I think, my final thoughts would just simply be, you find those around you that are where maybe you want to be, or you think they're there, and you ask them how they got there. You ask them for help. And when you come from a place of authenticity and just wanting to live your values out of who you've been in life and where you want to be, I think status quo will be it won't be a status quo. You'll just continue to grow, and you'll continue to be the best version of yourself. And you'll, to Shaun's point, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, neither Seb, maybe neither Shaun, but we're all gonna have those circles around us that we're going to be able to help continue to grow and make each other better as we go through our journeys.
Yeah. Although you have to speak for yourself, I am everybody's cup of tea. I mean, really. Not at all. Seb, last final thoughts?
That's not what the WhatsApp group says. So I would say two things. I would say, as Tyler alluded to earlier, sometimes you have to jump out of the aircraft and build a parachute on the way down. And if the risk that's associated with whatever it is that you're going to take on is in a risk of physical harm and you're not going to implode as a result of it, then go for it. Something is going to really scare you. You don't know if you can take it on, and go for it. Like, take a stab at it, go for it. Put yourself in a position where you have no other choice to adapt to this new set of circumstances you're personally laid out in front of you. And once you're done with this and you have accomplished it, you're going to be able to look at what's coming next and say, well, I didn't know what I was doing here, and I engaged in it, and I successfully did it. So your self-worth and self-confidence is going to lead you through other endeavors that are going to be more and more complex, more and more challenging. It takes practice.
We haven't heard a techno Seb for a while. We lost him there. It does. It takes practice.
Takes
Shaun?
a lot of practice.
Final thoughts?
He's going to love that one.
He's going to love it, yeah.
So final thoughts are this. The status quo, as we've been talking about, is as defined I'll read it again. In the state in which things were before the war. The war, in my opinion, is the internal war, not the war around us, not the war in another country. It is the internal battle of our minds, our soul, our spirit, what is inside of us. We're trying to change that status quo. And if you can change your internal status quo, usually it creates an external shift for others. And so focus on yourself. Don't chase, like the two guys in the video, don't chase beating the people behind you and flipping them the bird. Just chase you. Do you better. Beat you. The internal status quo is what has to change. And if people are paying attention, they'll pick up what you're putting down. That's why the people that I surround myself with are cool as hell and make me want to work harder. Their status quo makes me want to change my status quo. And so your internal fight, your internal battle, your internal pursuit, your internal improvement, that's what changes the world. But the external world around you, make sure that it's got some cool as hell people who think outside of the box and make you push the envelope so that you're redefining your status quo.
I could not agree more. We got another comment on the Instagram here from Corbinator. He said, level up should be our everyday motto. I think that's a great line. It goes very much along the same lines as this right here. Every moment, do your best every day. And that's all I got to add here. Thank you guys again. This has been a fantastic conversation. Tyler, Shaun, Seb, this has been wicked. We'll see y'all next week. Chimo.